Librarian. Our guest authors today are Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. We're coming to you from Little Rock, Arkansas. We're located in the historic Dunbar neighborhood in Little Rock, and we're so excited to share that we are celebrating 33 years of Black culture through literacy. And it is just so exciting to be able to celebrate with these wonderful ladies. I have to say that Victoria Christopher Murray has a special place in my heart. We met in 1997, her very first book, Temptation. So she's been in the family for a very long time. And so welcome, Victoria. And Marie, this is your first time with Pyramid, but you're part of the family now. And I want to say that you are no stranger to the literary world. You are a best-selling, well-known best-selling New York Times author. And we want to say that to share the joy in your life that you say is that you bring the light, the voices of unknown historical women. So today you have, hit the ball in the ballpark, because guess what? The Personal Librarian is number 8, and it's because of you. So I want to say to everyone in the room, thank you so much for being here today, because you could be so many other places, but you're here with us. So without further ado, welcome Victoria and Marie, and we're going to get right to it and say, Victoria, Marie, how did this book, The Personal Librarian, come about? Take it away.
Okay, this is one of our favorite things to talk about. Started in Marie's head. So Marie, do you want to begin?
Wow. No pressure, but it actually, so the book is about, I even tell you a little bit about who it's about to make sense of how it all began. So the book is about Belle da Costa Greene. And the way I kind of first came across her, kind of what I love to do is find these unknown women from the past who've left us this important legacy and kind of dig them out. I kind of think of myself as like an archaeologist kind of. And I used to be a lawyer in New York City, and I used to escape from my job. I would sneak out and go to museums and libraries, and I had a special favorite in the Morgan Library. And so for those of you who haven't seen it, you have to go see it. But if you haven't yet, it is this gorgeous library that was created in 1906 by the famous financier, J.P. Morgan. It was actually created, it was 4 huge, stunning rooms, gilt artwork, beautiful rare books everywhere. And he actually created it to house his own art collection of Renaissance art, rare and priceless manuscripts, which is one of the things he really loved to collect. And so I used to go there to kind of escape from my life and imagine a different world, as Victoria knows. And so one day I happened to be there, and a docent happened to be passing by, and she mentioned that there was this wonderful woman, Belle da Costa Greene, who had been super involved in the creation of the library. And when J.P. Morgan built it in 1906, he hired her to become his own personal librarian. And in the over 4 decades that she ran the institution, or she was its director, she became one of the most powerful people in the art world. And I heard all this. I had never heard of this woman. I heard all this, and that kind of antenna that I've developed over the years for these important women went crazy. And so I added her to this list of women I wanted to write about. And I'm kind of always returning to this list, and I did over several years, but I knew the more I learned about Belle, I learned that she was so much more than that docent had ever told me, right? She was actually only able to do all that she had done by hiding her true identity and passing as white. Her father was the famous Richard T. Greener, the first Black graduate of Harvard, and he was a fierce advocate for equality in the years after the Civil War ended in Reconstruction. Huge advocate for the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which should have never been overturned, would have guaranteed equality right from the start. And this was who raised Belle da Costa Greene, along with her mother, who was part of this wonderful free community in Washington, D.C., had been free for generations. But because the world that promise of equality had really failed and segregation had taken hold, Belle, in order to succeed, had really had to pass. And so because of that, I really knew and wanted Belle I wanted to have a partner in writing the book. I knew Belle deserved to have a Black woman tell the story as well. As a writer of fiction, I can imagine a lot of things, but it's certainly not appropriate or even possible for me as a white woman to imagine what it would be like to live in the world as a Black woman, historically or present day, as I learned. And so one day happened, so I kind of put Belle aside. I was kind of searching for the perfect partner. And one day I read this marvelous book of Victoria's, which maybe some of you have read. If you haven't, you need to. It's called Stand Your Ground. And it's such a beautifully written, important book about the shooting of a young Black man. And Victoria told the story from the perspective, I hate to tell us while she's sitting right there, but anyway, I have to. She told the story from the perspective of the boy's mother and the wife, the white wife of the police officer who shot him. And I had never, this perspective was so unique and fresh and new. And, Victoria was really looking at such a challenging, difficult, important topic in our society from a completely new perspective. And I just hoped she would be my partner. I hoped she would be interested in writing the story of Belle da Costa Greene with me, but I didn't know if she would. So I wrote a treatment. I'd done some research, wrote a little treatment and some chapters, and I sent it to Victoria through my agent to her agent. And it's now Victoria's time to tell what happened.
I know, and you can always tell by Marie's face what must have happened. So my agent calls me and she says, I want you to do a collaboration. I want you to consider doing a collaboration. And I've done, as many of you know, 6 books with Rashonda Tate Billingsley, and I loved writing with Rashonda more than I liked writing by myself. So I said, okay, this is interesting. So the first thing I did was search Marie Benedict. And it was really interesting because I said, okay, this is very interesting. She writes historical fiction about women who have been lost inside the folds of history. That's really good, but what would she want with me? Because I hadn't read the proposal. And so the first thing I did was call my agent and say, I have this proposal. I looked up Marie Benedict. Has she seen like a picture of me? Like I couldn't imagine, is she seeing the whole? And so my agent said, yes, Victoria, she knows what you look like. She knows you don't have to worry about that. Just read the proposal. And I had that proposal and I started reading the first paragraph and it was about J.P. Morgan and I couldn't get to the second paragraph because I just didn't care about J.P. Morgan. And my agent would call me up and say, have you read it? And I'm like, oh, I'm really busy. And this went on for more than 2 months.
Oh, yeah.
And one day I was with Rashonda Tate Billingsley and my agent called me and I was like, oh, I'm really busy. I'm going to get to it. She's like, Victoria, it's 2 pages. You can't have this. Read it. And so Rashonda was as bad as me. We were both saying, what is Liza thinking? They're all mixed up. Why would I want to do a project like it? Doesn't matter. I don't care about J.P. Morgan. But with Rashonda, it took 2 people to sit down and read this thing. And we read it about J.P. Morgan and his library. And then we get to Belle, and she's a little interesting, but she doesn't become really interesting until the last line where no one knew she was passing for Black. And Rashonda and I just sat up in our seats and I could not call my agent fast enough. I said, I want in. We started looking her up. We were fascinated. And Rashonda said that night, she said, this book is going to be amazing. So that very night, when we finally read it. And it is so funny because reading is fundamental. If I had just read it, I could have solved a lot of pain for everyone.
Also, I
But
could have written it a little bit more compellingly. I think I've learned a lot about how to structure a compelling story. After that, I couldn't even hook you in like two
well,
pages.
I think what it was is that you were writing like for a reader, you letting it unfold. And I'm a writer, and I just wanted, if she had said, nobody knew that Belle was passing, I would have started right there and it would have been great. But the good news is that I did read it.
Oh, thank
And
goodness.
that moment I wanted in. And our agents connected us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was away someplace, and I'm sure you were
As
away.
you always were.
And I was sure
As you are.
as I am now. And the first time we talked on the phone, I knew.
I knew too.
Because
well, I knew already, but I was just hoping that you would agree.
Well, I knew, but I was worried about whether or not Marie if it would work for her, because she had never done a collaboration.
No, I never had.
And collaborations are like finding your soulmate as a writer. Absolutely. Not everyone can do collaborations because you have to trust your partner, just like you would have to trust the partner in any relationship. Right. And what I mean by that is you have to be honest with your partner, because you both have the same goal to write a great book. Right. So sometimes you have to cross out what your partner says, or you have to change it. And it's really interesting because some of the fun stuff, Marie is a champion researcher. I became really good at it. But Marie knows the language of the early 20th century. So I would write things like, "What's up, dude?" And it didn't quite work. And Marie had a historical brush. That's what we called it. That she knew how to do that. And it turned out to be a wonderful process. But that's how we got together.
Yeah. I mean, it like looking back on it, this is going to sound like all mystical and stuff, but it was almost like magical. Like, and we were actually talking to our editor about it today, about how, we talked about doing the book. We talked a few times, and then pretty soon thereafter, we had to talk to several editors about the book, how we were going to work together. We had never met in person at that point. And yet I knew, and of course I had read your work too, right? I knew what a great writer you were. I knew the power of your ideas and language, because I've read Stand Your Ground, but it was so much more than that. I just felt this connection to you and this tie to you. And I didn't know until a while later how perfectly we would complement each other. Victoria, I knew I could rely on you to help guide us through the collaboration process, right? People always ask us about like, how did you actually do it? And at first I thought it was going to be like a formula, because Victoria knows I'm like a flow chart, spreadsheet kind of gal.
Everything is like when somebody gives us a deadline, Marie believes them. When someone gives me a deadline, it's like a suggested date.
And I'm getting anxious, and you're like, it's okay. It's totally great.
So she is much more organized. And
I don't know about organized. You're very organized, but I take those deadlines to heart. But where we really had such incredible, just the work part of it, synergy, is that all the things that are, my weaknesses are your strengths, and the things that, and vice versa. Like, and then in the areas where, I lack experience, you had experience. I mean, it was really just, and things that you that you don't like to do, I love to do. Like that first draft, which is like your most dreaded.
I hate writing, and that might surprise some people, because like, how can you hate? Getting that first draft onto a piece of paper for me is like having my tooth pulled over and over and over again without any medication.
That's like a nightmare.
And it's like a nightmare for me. But that is Marie's strength, and that's Rashonda's strength. But then they write that first draft, and then they're done.
I do not. I'm like, I wrote it, it's finished, and you took it, and you could see all the areas that needed to be filled in. You could see where we needed to develop the character, where we needed dialogue, where we needed extra beats, and those were things, because I love that first draft, but then I'm done with that chapter and I want to move on. It really was such a perfect
So we
compliment.
both had to do parts we didn't like,
We
because one
did.
of the things that I'm most proud of
Yeah,
is that Marie and I wrote every word of this book together.
yeah, that's right.
So knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses, we talked out every chapter,
Every chapter.
how we imagined it would be.
That's right.
When we didn't know, we knew the day that Belle got hired, but we didn't know what the interview was like.
Right.
But we're fiction writers.
Right. We get to fill it in.
Yes.
And I feel like, I don't know about you, Victoria, but I feel like, our first draft was good, right? I mean, Kate had our editor, Kate Seaver, she had a lot of nice compliments, but there was some areas for growth. We'll put it that way. And, it's funny when it was really time for us to roll up our sleeves and get into like the deep part of the editing, that's when the pandemic hit. And suddenly, Victoria and I like to say Victoria's the only person I knew who traveled more than me, like probably more than anyone in the world. I'm just going to put it out there, but more than me. We went from running around to all different locations, book events, to suddenly both of us being at home in one place, as you like to say, traveling from your kitchen to your office. And it was a big shift, but it was a beautiful gift too. It was a terrible time. I mean, we're still dealing with it now. And I don't ever like to paint it as a rosy time. But if there was a silver lining for us, I feel like that slowing down, the gift of Zoom, where we are today, I am forever grateful for Zoom, because suddenly we went from talking about everything on the phone to talking to each other every day, face to face, or as face to face as you can get during COVID, and
Hours a day.
Hours a day.
One of the things that Marie and I say is we've never had a 5-minute conversation.
No.
But
not even an hour conversation, I don't think.
I know.
That would be tough.
I know. And we got to sit every day and just work this out, looking at each other.
Right.
But then something else happened.
Something else happened. The Black Lives Matters movement unfolded in our country, and all of these terrible incidences of racism and violence. And as we were talking about the racism and segregation in our characters' world, in the era after Reconstruction, when that promise of equality fell apart and Belle was forced, to live as a white person, not live as her authentic self, we were processing and dealing with and discussing all this racism in our own country. And a story that was, certainly historic with modern overtones, suddenly became very immediately modern as well. And our conversations, those 3 hours on the phone, the first hour was spent discussing the world. And I felt so honored by the fact that Victoria trusted me enough to really talk about her experiences and share with me the lens through which she sees the world. And it changed me forever.
It was an interesting time because we had an interview this morning or yesterday, I don't remember.
One big day.
But we were speaking about, we talked to our girlfriends sometimes about, girl, I went to Apple and they followed me around the store. And that's all, we let it go. I had never, and I have white friends, but I've never spoken to them about race because it sometimes felt to me that if I spoke to my white friends about race, it will sound, my opinion, like it's complaining all the time, because I got something to tell you every day about what I go through or what we all go through. So I've never talked to, except on the most superficial level. And here I was for the first time in my life speaking to a white woman who had become more than my friend, like my sister, but speaking to her honestly about race, about all the things. So if I were to say to many of you on this call, I go into the Apple store and get followed around. It was really interesting because this morning when we were speaking with Karen from NPR, she was like, oh yeah, because that's
Right.
what all of my girls, and she's Black, she's like, oh yeah, that's nothing. When I told that to Marie, she was horrified.
I,
She hasn't experienced it, hadn't
I'm gonna
heard
get
it.
upset now. I just couldn't. I mean, of course I could believe it, but I couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? Like, and it's, I know I've said this to you before. You know, I started to see everything through your eyes, and suddenly I'm in the Apple store and these people are following me around, and I just want to turn around and pop them because, like, it's just I know you can protect yourself, Victoria, but I mean, I just couldn't I just started to get so angry. And I think, on one level, I knew this stuff happened, but I just love you. And I just couldn't believe that someone was doing it to you and, or to anybody. But, I was suddenly seeing the world through your eyes and seeing all these horrible events unfolding in our country through your eyes. And then taking that lens and looking at Belle's world and the way she had to move through the world through your eyes. Now, of course, that's just, a fraction of what you experience. But I felt so honored that you would trust me to tell me those things. I mean, I know that those things are not easy to talk about. Those are uncomfortable conversations. And I'm always, am I going to say the wrong thing? But all I felt as you were telling me was honored that you would share that with me, and then furious that you had to deal with all that every day, all these
Yeah,
things that
yeah.
you have to shrug off are, I mean, they're the weight of it. I could just feel it on, from your shoulders to mine and then to Belle's. And as we were talking about it and then talking about Belle, suddenly, not only did I see the world we inhabited really differently, I started to see Belle really differently and very differently than that first draft. I mean,
The first draft was just a draft.
it was a draft.
It was just a draft. But because all of that was going on around us, we really wanted to be careful about how we describe Belle's passing.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I often hear, and Marie and I were very careful about this, is that people believe that a person passes because they want to be white.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what it is. I wanted to make it very clear that Belle's mother, who orchestrated this whole thing, Belle's mother didn't want to be white. Belle's mother wanted to be equal.
That's right.
That's what she wanted. She had been fighting for equality right alongside her husband as much as she could as a woman at that time. And when she realized that the Civil Rights Act was going to be overturned, she still wanted equality. She wanted the same equality that she wanted when she was fighting for it. When she believed that it was gone forever, she said, the only way I can get equality is by being white. And there's a line, I don't want to give away too much because I don't know who's read it and finished it, but there's one line in this book that I love where her mother says, because it was a time when they were fighting and they could have almost been lynched. And her mother says, I had to become part of a group that I abhor.
Right.
I don't even want like these people, but I have to do this to give my children the best opportunity. And Marie and I were so excited when we started getting reviews and from NPR that said, I get that right. I saw sacrifices and the struggle. And that was important to us in this book.
So important. I mean, I think the idea that, and I think Victoria pointed it out after we finished that first draft and we were working on that second one, saying we had made it too easy for Belle. We hadn't dug deep enough into the sacrifice of passing. and how hard that was, that her mother really didn't I mean, there were choices, but there were really no choices. And in order to walk down the path of passing, you were giving up, everything her father had stood for and taught her. You were giving up this beautiful, rich heritage that her mother had. I mean, they had this extensive, beautiful community, free people of color who had lived in Washington, D.C. for generations. And she had to leave all that behind, but so much more. I mean, she had to sacrifice really seeing her mother's family. Just as one example, her mother's brother used to come and visit the family in New York when they were still living kind of ambiguously. I guess they were living in a white neighborhood but hadn't really declared themselves as white. And he could no longer visit them, because what if a neighbor saw Genevieve's brother coming to visit them? And then Belle had to make so many personal sacrifices. Without giving away too much, there were a lot of limitations on what she could do in terms of marrying or having children without taking a chance that she would reveal her identity, and not just that, her immediate family. By the time she was kind of at the point of making those decisions and choices, she was J.P. Morgan's personal librarian. I mean, here she was, the right-hand person to one of the most powerful, richest men in America. She was fast becoming one of the most powerful people in the art world. So she would be giving up all of that, but more than that, all that financial benefit gave to her family. JP Morgan had given her the stamp of approval that she was white, so her whole family was living as white. And if her identity changed, then the whole family's identity would change. So, she had so much that she gave up to walk that walk. And
it's really important, Marie, about whether or not you could have a child, because I posted pictures of Belle on my social media, and so most of the people who follow me are Black, and they look at it and they're like, how did she even pass? She looked like my grandmother, my sister. I mean, and even Karen that we spoke with from NPR, she in her review, she said, I don't know how she fooled all of those people. And I think it's because Black people have known shades of Black from the beginning of time. We've known the shades of Black. I think it really wasn't until almost like the 1970s that we started talking about mixed race and biracial children and things like that. And we brought the white world along with us, but we've known about shades. And so I think it was for white people, you're only Black or you're white.
Mm-hmm.
And so every single Black person looks at a picture of Belle and says, how did she get away with it?
Right.
And Belle was probably wondering that herself.
Sometimes.
She had to be very, very careful.
So she would have been walking on a tightrope this whole time, wondering who was going to give it up, who was going to discover her and then out her. And so she had to use every tool in her toolkit to try and make sure that wasn't going to happen. Her real name was Belle Marion Greener, but to disassociate herself from her father, Richard T. Greener, her mother changed her last name to Greene. And then her mother added Decosta, right, as her middle name instead of Marion, because of course Belle was Portuguese, right? That was the explanation for her slightly darker skin. And, at that time, it was the first time that a lot of Mediterranean people were coming to the United States, New York in particular, and they kind of leapt on that as a possible explanation. But then she did all these other things, right? As we like to talk about, she hid in plain sight, right? And she tried, it was almost like the magician's act of deflection, like, I'll wear this brightly colored scarf so you'll look over here and you won't really scrutinize my complexion. I'll say these flamboyant things because you would never think that a Black person at that time would say something like that. So she would use all these different, tools in her toolkit, for lack of a better word, to try and make people, because she knew, right, that people were going to question it.
And one thing, as everybody's reading this book, I want you to consider one of the most important things to me as we were writing about Belle is that Belle was 16 years old when the decision was made that she would live as a white woman. Think about that. Think about you're 16 and you have to change exactly everything about yourself, including your name. And for 16 years, she was Black. Not only was she Black, she was the daughter of Richard T. Greener, he would have been the head of Black Lives Matter today. That's who he was. He was the dean of Howard's Law School. His contemporaries were Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington. He was all about equality for colored people. He would say Black, white, and colored. He would say racism is not our problem. It's the white person's problem. He was an activist. So for 16 years, she was raised by this man. And then one day, she has to become totally white. And that was a fork in the road, because at 16, you have a history. You know who you are. So she knew she was Black. But she wasn't old enough to make the decision on where she was going to go. The mother took all the children. And so she fell into that life. And one of the things Marie and I always say is that throughout Belle's life, she never left that crossroads.
Right.
She never left that fork in the road. So she struggled her whole life with wearing the mask. And I know some of you may have read Paul Dunbar's poem, We Wear a Mask. And she wore a mask much more than many of us have to do, because we go out there and we just have to say the right thing and have the shoulders back and all of that. But she had to be something she was not.
Right. And in doing that, that leaving all that behind, as you said, she never left it behind. She was always emotionally, intellectually still at that crossroads, wondering, had she make the right choice? Should she make a change? Thinking about, she was very close with her father, thinking about how would he perceive the choices she was making, and what was she disappointing him? Was she disappointing everyone? It was a very heavy decision and heavy walk that she had to walk.
But I'm so glad that Marie found Belle.
Oh my gosh.
Because I think this woman's story needed to be told.
Oh my gosh.
Right? She would have been she would have been just lost in history.
Right.
And people would still go and visit that beautiful place. If you go to New York, you must go to the Morgan Museum, especially now. You're going to feel, if you read the book, you're going to feel like you've been there. Because you're going to be, oh, I know where his office is. Oh yeah, that's her office. So you're going to feel like you were there. But if Marie hadn't brought this story, hadn't wanted to write this woman's story, we wouldn't have known about her, which I find fascinating, because whether we know his name or not, we've all heard in passing the first Black person that graduated from Harvard. Whether you remember, most of the people know Richard T. Greener, but you know that there was a first, and this was his daughter.
Right.
And so I'm just so grateful that we were able to bring her story and who she was and the important legacy that she left for all of us. I'm so grateful that we were able to bring her to life.
And I'm so grateful that Victoria, after many months of thinking this project wasn't for her, I am so grateful that she agreed to be my partner, because this has been the most important, transformative, powerful writing experience of my life, and friendship as well. I just feel so fortunate. So fortunate.
So that's our story. Garbo, you have questions for us?
Some questions. We in Bookland who love to read are excited that you collaborated and brought this women to light to us. But there are many famous books about passing, including Nella Larsen's Passing and Britt Bennett's Vanishing Half. Did you all did you read those books? Was that part of your research?
Actually, we were talking about this earlier today. Books like Vanishing Half and Helen, I'm not going to pronounce this right. Oyeyemi, am I pronouncing that right? Boy Snow Bird, Yellow Wife, which is a recent, wonderful book. On some level, all talk about passing. And certainly Belle, I knew about a long time ago, and we were writing our book while those books, they weren't out. I did read Nella Larsen's Passing. I think maybe even before we started writing. Or in that kind of time frame. And I mean, that is such a powerful book because it's almost like a historical document. It's written during that time period. It's I think Nella Larsen herself could have passed probably and did at certain times. And I thought that was a really eye-opening read for sure.
But when I was thinking about this book, Garbo, I never thought about it in terms of passing. I thought this book was about Belle da Costa Greene, the woman who helped J.P. Morgan become the man that we know. This was the woman, we always talk about the women behind these powerful men. And she was the most successful career woman of her time. So when I think of her story, I think of it as the story of Belle da Costa Greene, who was passing. That was one part of her, a very important part. I'm not saying it, but I never thought about it as a passing book. As I thought about it as a biographical novel of a woman who would have been lost in history.
Yeah. Okay. And I think too, that's such a good point, Victoria. And I think too, when I first learned about her, the docent didn't mention that she was Black. She mentioned this power, that to the point of her just power and her success as a woman at a time period when women couldn't even vote, when women had no power, when women were so marginalized and relegated to the fringes. And then the idea of her passing and her heritage and her sacrifices, that was just another layer to the really complicated, important woman that was Belle. But yeah, it was a big part of her story for sure. But she was, oh my gosh, her legacy is so vast and wide. And it would have been even more so had we known her full identity.
Okay, so I want to encourage all of you in our Zoom audience to put your questions in the chat room. And we do have one from Annalise Bowers. And she says, while writing the story, did you get so caught up in the characters that it felt like you were experiencing what you created together, what you created? Did you feel that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say hi to Annalise Bowers. She is our kid detective. She is an author, 13 years old.
Amazing.
And has a little book club. I shouldn't say little, she has a book club where she and her teenage friends are reading the Personal Librarian. And so they read it chapter by chapter, and then they have book discussions about it. So Marie, I was telling them when they finish, we would be glad to talk to them.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love it. I'd love to talk to young adults about it and see their perspective.
Yes, but Annalise, I did get caught up. There were times when I felt like one of the things that we did, I don't know if we mentioned this, Marie, we went to the Morgan Library before we started writing. We were just at the beginning of writing the book, and Marie suggested, we were going to be in New York at the same time, and she suggested that we go to the library, which was wonderful, because one of the things that I tell people when I teach writing is our job as an author is to put the reader there. And so when we were in the library and spent all those hours there, then when we went back to write, we could put you in the library. And so there were times when I was writing when I felt like I was sitting right there in the library, or when Belle would get up from her office, I knew exactly where JP Morgan's office was, or when visitors came in. I mean, I knew the whole thing because we had been there. What about you, Marie?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I could, there was a point at which Victoria and I kind of each stood, one of us in his study and one in her office, to kind of see how they would see each other. So much of the book takes place in the Morgan, but it's also about the Morgan is symbolic of their legacy, and so of her legacy, really. So we wanted to make sure we had every corner, nook, and cranny of it right. And not only did the place come alive, but I mean, there were times, Annalise, to answer your question about did she feel real too? She did. I mean, there were times when we would be like talking out like what she would do, and we would talk about her like she was a person that we knew. Like, well, I don't think Belle would say that, or what would Belle have done about that, or would she really have said those words, or do you think she would have kissed JP Morgan? I mean, and here we are talking about her literally like she was a third person in the room with us. And over time, the more we talked about her, the more we kind of went back and forth on it, the more alive she became, really, to me. Not like we're having hallucinations over here in our offices, but I mean, she felt really real.
I think every author has a few hallucinations.
Right. We could feel her tapping her foot, being like, "It took you this long to tell my story." So,
well, we do have a question from Mary Cantwell. She says, "How did Belle become knowledgeable about eliminated manuscripts?"
That's a great question. And
that's all. Marie was the history buff in this. I did do a lot of research, but
Victoria's gotten to be amazing at research.
I got good at it at the end, but I learned so much about manuscripts and and everything from you.
Stuff you may never use again, but it's really fun and interesting for this topic. So I think Belle was in many ways self-taught. Her actual education, her formal education, is a little bit murky. She told people one thing. We're not really sure. The record doesn't always bear all of it out. Certainly she went through high school. She said she went to teachers college. She may have. She definitely did some summer programs at Amherst in kind of like library sciences, but there was no formal education to be a librarian at that time, as there is today. But she started her real education in manuscripts and rare books, which are called inconubula. I think that's how it's pronounced, but you'll see that word in the book quite a lot. So that's what that means. It's the very earliest printed books. And that started back with the Gutenberg Bible in the 1400s and moved into England with William Caxton in the 1400s as well. But those were things that JP Morgan loved to collect. The Morgan Library, in many ways, was like really a testimony to the history of the printed word and the spread of literacy, which is so important. But Belle, before she went to the Morgan Library, she actually was a librarian at Princeton University, at their university library. And they had a really excellent collection of old manuscripts, early printed books. And she was very attracted to them. And they had almost like apprenticeships, and she did sort of that with one of the experts there. There were classes offered for the librarians. She took those. And she became friendly with Junius Morgan, who was one of the donors. And that's how she got the introduction to JP Morgan. Once she actually was on the job, and she really had to learn on the job, she had to learn all about, the history of these books, these manuscripts, but she also had to learn the art business. She had to learn how collectors worked, how museums worked, who the players were, how an auction worked, how to finesse an auction. She learned if she was going to be really appraising and assessing these books and manuscripts, she needed to be able to speak the original language. So she learned Latin and Italian and French. So this was a woman who was working 24/7 to educate herself about every single facet of this business, this world, because she knew for probably anybody, anywhere at this time, this was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and she was going to maximize everything about it. And she did.
Well, I definitely know how Belle feels is that I'm also an appraiser and we have a fine art gallery here. So this was really exciting for me to read. But a fellow appraiser has some loaded questions for you, Miss Alva
Uh-oh.
Binder. And so listen to every question because it's loaded. She says her father left them in a non-honorable way for another woman, a Japanese woman. Do you think some of her positioning was a direct rejection of him and his work? How did she build her skills? Did she apprentice at any point? Was she modeling? Was she an intuitive? What influence did you find that her relationship with Berenson have on her? So that's a
Wow.
loaded question, I told you.
That's a lot. So the
That's
first
a lot. Those are amazing questions, each and every
know.
one of them.
I
So
know.
I think I could take the first one because a lot of them, Marie, that was her expertise. But her father didn't leave the family for another woman. This was years later. He left the family because he did not want to pass for white.
Yeah.
And his wife, who had been in the fight with him, refused to go, and there was just no way for them to stay together, for him to fulfill his dream or for her to fulfill her dream. So it was years later when he was appointed as an ambassador, when he met the Japanese woman in Russia. So he did not leave for another woman, not at all. In fact, they never got divorced.
Right.
And I think that's a very important point. They could have gotten divorced and neither one of them did.
Right.
So what was the second question?
Yeah, there were a lot of questions there.
Okay. Do you think some of her positioning was a direct rejection of him and his work? And how did she build her skills? I'll give you two at a time.
Was it a reject? I don't know. What do you think, Victoria? Rejection of him.
She was rejecting him at
Yeah.
all. At all.
I
I
don't
think
think
she went along with her mother.
Yeah.
Okay.
From things that we were able to put together, because one of the things we wanted to do is stay true to her character. All the facts that we knew about Belle, when we had to fictionalize things, we wanted it to be in line with everything that we knew about her. And one of the things that we believe is that she learned a lot of this from her father. She learned a lot about art from her dad. And we just imagined her as this daddy's girl, like she was the favorite one because she had this interest where the other children did not. And he had been a librarian and she almost followed in her father's footsteps in a lot of ways. So I don't think she was rejecting him at all. In fact, I think that was her struggle, that she was not rejecting him.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Did she apprentice at any point?
I think I mentioned like almost like an apprenticeship. So when she was at the Princeton University Library, they had, you had the kind of the opportunity, they had an amazing collection in a lot of different aspects. And I know that they offered, I want to say it was like kind of a loose apprenticeship, not a formal apprenticeship as we might think of it, but you had the opportunity to kind of study under different people depending on your interests. And she definitely did take advantage of that when she was there. I think she was, because her father had almost like a little collection of archival material himself. She was attracted to the older things, the historical documents, and of course the Princeton had this amazing collection that had been donated by Junius, actually. And she was very interested in that as well. So I think Belle was an extremely intelligent person. And she was like a sponge. She could glean every morsel of information. At least this is how I think of her. We talk about her like we know her, but she's a fictional character. But anyway, Belle, this is like, if this answers Annalise's question from earlier, yes, we think of her as like a real person. I'm talking about her like she's sitting right here. But our Belle, was just so bright and so nimble and so able to read a room and absorb complicated information and synthesize it. And so I think she gleaned every piece of information she could from the Princeton Library. And she took that with her and then elevated that with JP Morgan.
So she was very much an intuitive. Marion Coleman asked, once she left the post of personal librarian, did she marry and have children?
She never left the post of personal librarian.
Okay.
She was in the role of director of the Morgan. I don't want to give away too much, but
Okay.
I already did it. Director of the Morgan Library for her entire life.
Her whole life.
Her whole life.
Even after JP passed away, that was when she was on a mission already, but she really became on a mission when he passed away.
That's right.
So this is our last question. This is from Nicole Lester, and she says, what do you hope this book will contribute to the legacy of Belle da Costa?
What a good question.
Good question. You know, one of the things that, well, it's from Nicole, Marie.
Oh.
But one of the things that we really hope, I mean, besides the history and you knowing her, one of the things we really hope is that this book will open up a discussion between the races.
Yeah.
And it may start with women because we always have to be the ones to fix and change everything. But you know, I always say, people say the most segregated hour in America is 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. I agree, but I think there's another segregated hour, and it's Friday night at 6 p.m. or Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. whenever book clubs meet.
Right.
Book clubs tend to be very segregated. And the experience that Marie and I had together that was really life-changing, to sit down with a white person and talk honestly about race, honestly, not trying to hide your feelings, not trying to pull back, because there's certain words that I just never would use. I wouldn't use white supremacist when talking to a white, I just wouldn't use it. But if the way we were able to speak, I hope this book, because of Belle, opens up conversations. I really, really do. When we first started this, Marie and I talked about, wouldn't it be great if Black book clubs and white book clubs came together? Even when we were working with Berkeley, our publisher, on the questions for the reader's guide, I was saying to Marie, oh, Black readers are going to answer this differently than white readers. And I think that's going to be part of the fun of it and the lessons of it.
Absolutely. I mean, that would be our dream, is if the book certainly sparked thoughts and conversations, but really, truly operated as a bridge and a way of bringing people together. And I mean, if even a handful of people were able to have the experience that Victoria and I had in writing this book, by reading this book, that would be, that would be a huge gift.
I hope it becomes a documentary, a movie. I mean, I just can see this flourishing, just putting it out there,
Well, it's flourished a lot because of people who are on the Zoom call and all of our readers. Marie doesn't say it, she makes me say it. And you've already said it, Garbo, but it's because of all of these, everybody who's here, that it has already flourished, and it's made the New York Times list, and it was considered an instant bestseller because it did it in its first week.
Yeah.
And so that was Marie makes me say it because I've never been on the New York Times. So she says I need to have to
say it.
Got to practice. Practice makes perfect.
And then that means it's going to happen again.
Exactly. So I hope to see you guys can continue to collaborate, and I hope that's that you are. Excellent. And before we do our thank yous and give away a book, we are giving away a book tonight, and we're going to do our pyramid commercial because we want you to order the book from us. Because we do have signed copies. Can you believe that? We have signed copies. So I want you guys to have say your goodbyes or anything you want to share, last words with our audience.
No, I just say thank you so much. And we hope you enjoy the book, and please just continue to pass the word and tell everybody about it, because I think it is an important book. And then also look for us on Good Morning America.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you watch us on our next Good Morning America segment, you'll get a really deep, good look at the Morgan Library as well. We were fortunate enough last week when we filmed our segment, which we think is going to air on July 14th. We got to film it in the Morgan Library, so you get to kind of see some of the places that are so critical to the book and really adds another really interesting layer.
Yes, we couldn't tell you we were going to be on Good Morning America before because
Right.
it's known for months and it's a secret, but now we can tell you.
Now we can say.
Exactly.
I just want to say thank you so much for having us, and thank you to readers out there. I mean, we are so fortunate with the support that booksellers and readers everywhere have really been giving us in this book, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for Victoria, and I'm so grateful to all of you.
Well, thank you both, because we wouldn't be here without you. And thank you to Zoom. And thank you to Anna, because Anna, you.
Thank you,
Anna.
Anna.
Thank you, Anna. And I want to definitely thank Penguin, Random House, Deshay, and Danielle
Oh, they're
for
wonderful.
reaching out to Pyramid, because, you know, we're one of 100 Black bookstores in the United States. And so we're glad to be here and participate. And we're about to give a book away, but order the book from us.
Yeah.
We do report to the New York Times, so it will definitely count. So Anna, let's do this.
All righty. So before we get into the wheel of names, we would like to acknowledge another author that's in the room, Victoria's other writing partner, Rashonda Tate Billingsley.
Yeah,
So,
she couldn't turn on her camera because she stayed on the set.
Okay.
Well, welcome, Rashonda. I couldn't see you.
Rashonda,
Nice
I
to see
sometimes feel like it's you that made Victoria read that proposal. So an extra thank you today.
No,
Thank you.
together we were like, what is life?
and also, I say that to just say that Rashonda is excluded from our drawing today, because I'm sure that she has a copy of the book. Probably saw the book before it was published. So we're going to
look at your wheel. That's so cute.
The wheel of names. These are people who came into our Zoom today. We also included people that watched on Facebook and commented on Facebook. So if you participated on Zoom and or Facebook, I tried to make sure everyone was included.
This is awesome.
All righty, so let's go ahead and spin the wheel. And our winner today is the person who joined us via phone.
And who is that?
I don't know who this person is.
Okay.
We will call you after the presentation to make sure that you get your book.
Okay, and one last thing. I want you to know Arkansas, Victoria, and Marie are coming back. They are going to be part of the Six Bridges Literary Festival, so October 21st through the 31st. Don't know when or where, but look for them. They have agreed to come back via Zoom. So, and Marie and Victoria will come to Pyramid once all this pandemic is over.
Oh, we will.
Right?
I can't wait.
Definitely.
Definitely with our next book.
Oh, yeah. For sure, by then, things have got to be back to normal in 2 years.
So all of you on this call, you heard it first from Victoria and Marie. So thank you so much for spending your time with us. And
thank you for supporting me all these years. It's
been thank you.
Yes. So we're here. We're going to keep staying. We're going to be here. So thanks again and have a good night. And you will be getting a copy of this recording and a special treat that will come as a follow-up. So open your email is very important.
Oh, good. I'm excited.
Thank you.